What's going on YouTube? Mike with iHeart Knives. Today we're going to go over 5 tips for you to get a sharp knife. I personally think that these 5 tips are the easiest, simplest ways and thoughts that you can keep in your mind when you are sharpening to pretty much guarantee yourself to get a sharp knife. Obviously it takes practice, you have to work on it, it's not going to come overnight, but if you keep these 5 methods in your mind as you're sharpening, I think you'll have a much easier time getting a sharper knife. So, tip 1, choose the right stone. Not all stones are created equally. You have ceramic, you have naturals, you have diamonds, and there's other types like CBN that I don't have here, but you also have silicon carbide stones. You have resin bonded versus electroplated diamond, and each stone will work differently, and each stone has a purpose. Depending on the steel that you're sharpening, you need to choose the right stone for that steel. So, for instance, M390, which is a wear-resistant tool steel, does not sharpen as easily as D2, which is a lower wear-resistant tool steel. So they're both tool steels. They're both used for tooling, but M390 is much more wear resistant. D2 is not. D2 you can sharpen much easier than M390. Now there are other factors that go along with it, but let's just, for the sake of this video, say that it's a blanket statement. You won't be able to sharpen M390 on a Japanese natural stone, whereas depending on the D2, I've actually sharpened D2, this Rat 1, on Japanese natural. So, it can be done. But different stones sharpen different steels differently. Diamonds are the best way to go for the most wear-resistant stones, as well as CBN. Silicon carbide will cut even your most wear-resistant steels like Maximet. But as like a general statement, diamonds and CBN are the best way to go for wear-resistant steels, and ceramic stones like the Shapton Glass, Shapton Pro, you're going to have a really tough time abrading the real wear-resistant steels. You might be able to get away with M390, but you probably won't be able to get away with Maximet. So, second tip, and this is a very well-known tip. Use a Sharpie to mark the bevel of your knife. By marking a Sharpie on your edge bevel, you'll have a visual aid and a visual guide as to where the stone is abrading on your knife, and you can adjust your hand and your hand-eye, coordination accordingly. So if you're a little too low, you're going to know because you won't be hitting the apex, and the Sharpie will tell you that. If your angle's a little too high, you're going to be hitting the apex, but you won't be getting behind the apex, at the higher part of the bevel. Sharpie is your friend, and I personally recommend, especially when you're first starting out, to use Sharpie, and even to this day, I still use Sharpie. The third tip, don't be afraid to use a lower grit stone when you're setting your apex up. When you start out with sharpening a dull knife, go coarse. Even if your knife isn't that dull, I recommend going coarse because you'll get your knife sharp faster. Chances are, because it's going to be faster, you won't be putting as much pressure. When you use higher grit stones to start out with sharpening with a dull knife, you're probably going to get impatient and you'll start putting pressure on the blade and on the stone so that you get it done faster, which actually will work against you later on. So don't be afraid to grab the 220 grit stone or 400 grit stone and get your get your apex and your bevel where you need it to be before you progress up to the higher grit stones. If you use a 1000 grit stone every single time, you're going to be wearing your 1000 grit stone out much faster, whereas 30 seconds, on simple steel like white number 1, 30 seconds on a 220 grit Shapton Pro versus 2 or 3 minutes on the Shapton 1000 for the same, to get to the same point in sharpening. Everyone thinks that you're removing more steel on the 220 than you are the 1000. The fact is, you're removing the same amount of steel. It's just taking you more time. You're talking very, very small amounts of steel removal, even when you use coarser stones. So I recommend go coarse, start coarse, and then go up to your, through your grits. And I think you'll find that you'll get a sharp knife faster, and you'll have more fun doing it because you won't be rushing to get it done because you're seeing the result happen. Tip number 3.5 is don't use too much pressure. That pretty much goes along with using the lower grit stone. So I recommend, especially as you get into the higher grit stones, don't use pressure. Use the weight of the knife only. Basically, after I get above 1000 grit, I just use the weight of the knife to let the stone do the work, and that way you won't crush your apex, and you'll have, I think, a higher success rate in getting that knife sharp, rather than using a lot of pressure when you're sharpening and risking crushing the apex, and you have to start all over again, or do a lot of work to recover what you just messed up. Tip number 4 is have patience. It's a tough one because we all want this instant gratification. We want our knife sharp now, but it didn't take overnight for your knife to get dull unless you did something ridiculous with it, like cut a rock or something stupid. But it took, let's say, a week or 2 for your knife to get dull. Well, it's going to take you 20-30 minutes to get it sharp again. So have patience, take your time, and let the stones do the work. If you think that moving faster and adding pressure is going to get you the result that you want, you're probably wrong. Unless you're really, really good at sharpening and you know what the hell you're doing. But especially for new guys, take your time and let the stones do the work, and you'll see the result. Just breathe. It'll happen. It's still not sharp. How about now? Alright, it's been 30 seconds and it's still not sharp. Maybe I should push harder. Still not sharp. Fuck it, I'm buying a new. Tip number 5 is strop. Strops are your friend, especially when we're paying money for a knife like this with M390 steel. And I fell victim to this. I thought that sharpening was the way to go, but stropping is actually the way to go. Stropping will recover your edge 3, 4, 5 times before you have to go to a sharpening stone, and then you're leaving your steel and the performance of your knife to its best ability for a longer period of time. The less steel you remove, the better, because the geometry doesn't change on the knife, you don't thicken the edge up, and you get more life out of the knife, more life out of the blade, more life out of your stones, and you can easily recover your edge with a strop as long as you don't go too far and chip it or damage it in a real serious way. So those are the 5 tips for getting a sharp knife. I'll just go over them one more time. Choose the right stone. Use a Sharpie to mark the bevel. Don't be afraid to start with a lower grit stone. 3.5 is don't use too much pressure. 4 is have patience. And 5 is strop. Get yourself a strop and use it. Use compounds and choose compounds and leather accordingly based on what your steel type is. That's going to do it for this video. If you guys learned something and you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave it down in the comments. Please hit the subscribe button. And see you guys on the next one. Later.